Hi, my name's Andrew McLaren, and today we're going to talk about extra credit and why teachers should never offer it, and when they do, how that creates inequality in the classroom. And it basically boils down to creating a wider gap in the grade book. The grades are inaccurate, and then extra work is okay, but not extra credit. We'll talk about how that also will fit into a proficiency grading scale so that you can use something that's kind of like extra credit for good. When teachers discuss students, we often look at students who have a high score and a low score, and we'll talk about the gap between them, or like an achievement gap specifically for some groups. So if we've got students that are doing really well and they get extra credit, they're going to take the opportunity and get even higher scores, right? The students that are not doing well oftentimes don't use extra credit points, so the gap between the highest scores and the lowest scores becomes even bigger in your grade book, which is a huge problem, right? In addition to that, students who are far behind, they may not want to do the classwork, so they may be looking for other opportunities to get similar points. And then they're avoiding doing the classwork to do something that you've determined was extra or not as important. So now students are prioritizing students that are things that are less important to you than what you really want them to be focusing on. So we really have to be careful about widening that gap, because then also you're going to be like, I've got too many A's, I need to make things harder. And that's going to hurt the students that are doing poorly as well. And their scores are going to go down even more when you try and make adjustments for like all the 110% that you suddenly have, right? So careful. Extra credit also makes grades very inaccurate. So you could have a student whose understanding is at like a C level and they can't do better than that on a test, but they always do their homework, they always do their extra credit. They could even get an A in some classes with how things are graded. And then that student's like, I'm really good at math or something. And then they go in next year and the teacher's got a different grading policy that looks at test scores a lot more. And suddenly the student's failing and they don't understand why. And it really comes down to us giving them a false impression about how well they're doing. And so we need to make sure that the grades are accurate. We're not artificially boosting grades based off of students' behaviors, but grades really reflect their level of understanding and their ability to do the work. And if we're talking about what an A really means, if you have a ton of students who are able to do the work and they're up to the standard, it's okay if you've got a ton of A's. But if they've all gotten there not based on the understanding, but by doing extra work, I don't think that they all are at the standard. So you have to be careful about being inaccurate due to this. While extra credit is bad, extra work can be okay. Because if they do extra work and then they do better on a test, those extra points that they got came from an improvement in their performance. So if you've got extra work that's not directly tied to points, but instead supports a goal or supports them doing well on a test, give that to them, and that should help. So for example, I have this one practice test that I gave to students a week beforehand, before actually doing the real assessment. And they had to make a model. I had a ton of instructions for them, and they could compare it with other students. So they could put it on a Padlet and discuss what they liked about each other's models. And it looks pretty much exactly like how the actual test looks, but it's a different phase change. So it's the same expectations, but it's slightly different. And if they did well on this, then they would do well on the real test. So I also had like a student come up to me and talk to me before class about that optional assignment and just discuss with me their model that they had made, and they wanted to have a really good understanding so that they were ready for the test. And they actually got a perfect score on it the very first attempt. It was pretty sweet. So you can see this is the actual test versus the practice. Same sort of question, but different, slightly different prompt. This was evaporation, and I believe the other one was, freezing. So it's different phase changes, but they had essentially the same rubric. And I was able to give them feedback based off of like spacing of the molecules, the colors that they've used, and that type of stuff. I show this a little bit more in detail on my video on grading modeling, if you'd like to see that. So that's an example of them doing extra work that leads to a higher score on their test. So we can consider extra credit as another opportunity to show what you know. And if you look at proficiency-based grading, you can replace an old test score with a new test score or other form of assessment that could be modified based off of a student's special needs or limited English proficiency. So you could have them using some pre-made labels and putting them on a model or something like that, or it could be a different model of something else entirely than what you were looking at when you were learning that concept earlier in the year. And if they understand something better or more familiar with like the solar system, they can build some sort of model and you can measure that as well. So these extra credit opportunities can be additional ways to score their skills and fit into proficiency grading. Thank you for McLearning with me. I've got a few more offers that I'd like to let you know about, and remember, like and subscribe. For each video on YouTube, I am making an interactive version using HP5. These will be for sale on Podia, and if you click on the link in the video, you should be able to go directly to that product. I also have 2 demos I'm going to be linking so you can kind of see what these products look like. So I would recommend checking out those demos. I also offer one-on-one remote tutoring through Wyzant. Please use the links that I have linked below. That way I can get 100% of the hourly rate as opposed to 75. Each video also has a link for my Patreon, and you can join at the $3 level to get some resources I use for tutoring or to support the channel. And I also have a $5 raffle level, which you could either get some free online tutoring or 5 interactive lessons for free. You choose which ones. And then I also have my Teachers Pay Teachers, which has some old lessons that I made from when I used to be a teacher. I may be adding to that. Thank you for spending your time with me. I hope that you learned something.